Hello? Hello? So he speaks, always. I was just trying to have a clear understanding that God always speaks about clouds, rain, everything in line with the blessings. And, okay, so verse 8, I said verse 7 and 8, fine. So after each and everything, food is there. It's same principle in the spirit. Every time you pray, you take breakthrough is there, provision is there. God begins to open a way. God begins to tell you which way are you supposed to take. Unfortunately, we were so lazy. Lazy to come closer to God. Everything that you need. You say, honey, I must share the testimony that you shared with us. We're telling our children last night. You know, when we arrived at the hotel, our children came to our room. We were just meditating on what the Lord was doing. The last night. They were that type of a family. We always have reflections and talk and enjoyed it last night, all of us there. Then we shared your testimony. It was powerful testimony when God, she saw a piece of land with a house that was sold. Then with a grass almost covering that house. He thought it was one house, but eventually that was two houses there. Then in a place where, I think, I'm not if I'm saying right, where people would not be very much interested or whatever, yes. Then he spoke to God. I like the way you put it, Henry, because I like the sensitivity of, inquiring from the Lord and hearing from the Lord. You know, it takes a person who's trusting the Lord, whose heart is warmed up to God, who knows how to, when God says no and when God says yes. And then she said, she eventually made an offer to the property, and then the property was 400,000 whatever, but she went back to the Spirit of God and said, what, Lord, what must I offer? And the Lord said, 350,000. And then she said, no. And then she went back and made the offer, and the estate agent said, no. There was a person that I presented his or her offer that was 380,000. They declined it. And then she said, do your work and go and present my offer. And the offer was accepted. You see, it ties up with what Pastor Charles was saying there. Yeah, about failures, failing. You will never start a business if you're that type of a person who say, no, if so-and-so has failed, if so-and-so has made an offer of this, and then so many people have made an offer in this. If God says do something, do that. And your blessing will always be attached to faith. Faith, which is risk. And there was a reason for that. Why God did say that. Because at the end of the day, whether she already bought it, I was not sure what it was, but another estate agent came and make a big offer to her now. I understand we are the person who bought the property, but can I make an offer, a big one? And I said, there can be a lot of temptation if a person does not hear, listen. If your spirit is always sharp, you are not going to be tempted by those tenders, what comes your way. You are not going to abort your blessing because you know that your spirit, it warms up to God. You are able to hear when God comes down, the rain of the blessings of rain, when they come down. We are all able to sensitize what God is actually saying at that time. Hello? Proverbs 11 verse 25. I told you that I'm reading. Eh? Hello? We are ready. The was galali kona we indendi bona. Slala late. So 11 verse 25, the Bible says. Let me start from verse 24. There is one who scatters yet increases more. And there is one who withholds more than is right, but he leads to poverty. Then let's go to verse 24. The generous soul will be made rich, and he who waters will also be watered himself. You have to do something. For you to be watered, you must release. Release that which is in your spirit. Don't just be quiet. It's not necessary for me. You know what you are supposed to be asking? You must be asking from God, his spirit. Listen to me very carefully. Go with me to Romans chapter 8. And I teach you how to do this thing. Very simple. Before we close. Romans chapter 8. The Bible is saying there. The Bible says, verse 25. But if we hope for what we do not see, then we eagerly wait for it with perseverance. Now let's look at verse. Likewise, we eagerly wait for it, with perseverance. But verse 26 says, likewise the Spirit. But this is where I'm coming on. The Spirit, because the problem is that when you try to do it with your own efforts, you are going to fail. So this thing that I'm talking about, that your spirit is going to be, must be warmed up towards God. Don't just ever think that I'm going to try to make my spirit be warmed up. Trying to make, but likewise, the Spirit, which Spirit? Not your spirit, the Spirit of God. The Spirit also helps in our weaknesses. For we do not know what we should pray for as we ought to. That's the problem. Our main problem, all of us, is knowing what to be praying for. But as we ought to. It helps us in our weakness. It helps us in times where there's a temptation of just praying anything that comes your way. Just tapping into the Spirit of God. And that Spirit assists you. That is why we need to yield our spirits, our hearts to God, to clear up our hearts and offer our bodies as living sacrifices. You see, the problem is that I'm always tempted to speak about this thing, always. You see, because once I think about it, it means the Spirit is saying I must touch it. You know, the Bible says in the Romans chapter 12, before I finish that verse, Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to offer your bodies. Truly spoke about that. He said, I always talk that way. When we are not saved, we used to go out and send and offer ourselves. I'm not going to. Now, to offer our bodies as living sacrifices, holy, pleasing, and acceptable to the Lord. And the Bible said, do not be conformed according to the pattern of the world, but be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind. This illustration, I like it, and I always want to make it so that it becomes always, but it helps me. It helps me every day. It do not be conformed according to the pattern of the world. I always say, water, if you look at this bottle, this is water in the bottle. But the water in this bottle has got no choice but to take the shape of this bottle. Whether it can try to fast 100 days to 200 days to change the shape, it will never change. It's like you praying for change, but remaining in the same condition. Being bottled in the same way, you don't want to confess, you keep your things within you. You can fast 100 days, but demons will visit you. I've seen a lot of religious people who are said to be prophets and whatever, but being attacked by demons of suspicions and superstitions.